The biggest thing is going to be writing. And this is kind of goes back to that medical model versus the social model of how things are written, how things are perceived. They're often perceived in a very negative way. So saying somebody is defiant or non-compliant or aggressive or attention seeking, and kind of seeing if you can just flip that on its head a little bit and more of that presuming competence. So instead of defiant, oh, they're dysregulated right now, they're non-compliant, oh, they might be afraid of something, or they might be anxious instead of aggressive.
Hey there, and welcome to the Speechy Side Up podcast. My name is Vanita Litvack, and I am so grateful you're here. I'm an ASHA certified speech language pathologist, author, and augmentative and alternative communication consultant who is obsessed with helping SLPs like you stop reinventing the wheel and connect with other SLPs in the trenches. Have you ever wondered how other SLPs seem to be doing it all with ease? Well, around here, you'll get to hear firsthand how SLPs are really getting things done while keeping evidence-based practice and self-care in mind. Think of this as a coffee date with your SLP friends. Get ready to be challenged and encouraged while we learn together. As both a parent and a professional, I've seen behavioral strategies everywhere, whether it's in swimming lessons, sleep training, or classrooms. I believe there's a more effective and compassionate way to support young kids that honors their emotions and encourages real growth. That's why I'm thrilled to share our upcoming event with you called Behavior Connect, Prioritizing Connection First on November 15th, 2024. This event is all about moving beyond traditional behavior strategies to foster authentic connections with children. We've assembled an incredible lineup of speakers, including Carrie Ebert, Rachel from PTSD SLP, Iris from EF Toolkit, Dr. Diamond Rashad, Jackie Jebian Garcia from Create Yourself Co., and more. You can grab your free live ticket now by visiting aboutbehaviorconnect.com or clicking on the link in the show notes. Don't worry if you can't make it live. We will have affordable options to upgrade for replays and CEUs during early access registration starting October 21st, 2024. Get on the list so you don't miss any updates. All right, let's dive into today's episode of the Behavior Connect series. Today, I'm joined by Brooke Sheaffer, who is a school-based speech-language pathologist with over 3 years of experience. She has always had a passion for working with neurodiverse students and has worked with a variety of individuals, including those with intellectual disabilities, cortical visual impairments, and multiple disabilities. Currently, she works with both autistic support and general education students with a large focus in Gestalt language processing, AAC, and speech sound disorders. Brooke, thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks so much for having me. I've been following the podcast for many years, so I'm really excited to be here and get to talk to you.
I thought your name was very familiar. We've definitely communicated quite a bit over the years. So I'm so excited to have you on. Do you feel like that bio covers everything, or is there anything else you'd like to add before we talk about neurodiversity affirming care?
I think that covers pretty much everything. Yep.
Amazing. So, what does neurodiversity look like in a school setting, and how can we view it in a positive way?
Well, first off, taking it back to exactly what neurodiversity is, because some people might not know, neurodiversity, simply put, is just a different way of thinking, feeling, and processing information. So that might be something like autism or trauma or dementia or learning disabilities. That all kind of falls under the umbrella of neurodiversity.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you, but I like the visual that you have there. If anybody's watching this on YouTube, it's a nice graphic with all of the different conditions, or what's a better way to word that? I feel like that's not a good term.
Or just like all the terms, all the umbrella terms, I guess, would
Okay.
be.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, but it's great.
Yeah, yeah. So as far as the statistics, the National Cancer Institute found a couple years ago the 15 to 20% of the world's population does have some form of neurodivergence or neurodivergency. And then the Zurich.com found that 10% of people who are diagnosed with dyslexia, 6% with dyspraxia, 5% with ADHD, and possibly 1 to 2% with autism. But that might be higher just due to the lack of resources, marginalized groups. Females aren't diagnosed often either. So there used to be a huge stigma, but after looking at all these statistics, it's not so uncommon anymore to have any sort of neurodivergence out there.
I feel like it's so much higher than that, especially when you put trauma in there because we're not looking at like the difference between big T and little t. If I talked to Rachel from PTSD SLP, and she really helped us understand that like trauma, regardless of like big T or little t, still affects the body the same. So I feel like the percentage should actually be so much higher, but I imagine it's hard to gauge that.
Yeah, and I feel like trauma is something that is honestly very not underdiagnosed, but not really looked at as far as a neurodivergence as much as these other ones are concerned.
Yeah, that's something that has been really interesting. So I work with a business slash life coach who's also a mental health counselor. And we were talking about the possibility of me having ADHD. And she wanted me to look into there's a book, and basically it talks about the effects of trauma and how those look a lot like the characteristics of ADHD. So I just thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, I think of that a lot too. Honestly.
Yeah.
But there's actually a lot of really positive traits of neurodiversity. Kate Cockcroft and Melanie Hartgill, if I'm pronouncing them correctly, in 2004 found that dyslexia, if you have dyslexia, there's a lot of great rates in generating ideas, originality, and they're really good with spatial. So they can have things that are 3D, or they can look at something and figure out how it can be 3D modeled, which is impressive. I mean, I can't do that.
Yeah.
And Ludo tutors found that people with autism specifically, I feel like that's kind of my focus because that's what I do most of the time. They are really good at thinking and learning visually. They're honest and reliable. They're very detail oriented, which I can confirm. Many of my students are very detail oriented, and they're really good at directions too, being able to pinpoint like where you go, what you're doing, all that stuff.
So, yeah, let's talk about other benefits of being a neurodiversity affirming clinician.
Yes, there's all kinds of benefits, both from being the provider side and also from the student side. So looking at the provider side, from asklearn.com, they found that there's a lot of empathy, open-mindedness, and understanding. And from personal experience, I've noticed that a lot of these kids, they need a safe space. They need somebody to go to. And for myself, being very neurodiversity affirming, the kids know that I'm a safe space, and I'll acknowledge their positives, and they have that space. But the nice thing too is from the student side, they found that they have more improved mental health, an increase in self-esteem, enhanced academic success, which I think is really crucial. Like I said, especially to our students, as they might again have some of that trauma, or they might be in classrooms that might not be necessarily best fit for them, or some home environments that we can't control. So kind of having that open space with them and allowing them to kind of thrive and be who they are.
Don't you feel like, as a whole, our world needs to make a shift in being more neurodiversity affirming? Like how we have ADA guidelines and like having ramps have helped everybody as a whole. Having, elevators. I'm just trying to think of all of the different accommodations that have been made that actually just help the population as a whole. And I feel like that's what we should be doing with neurodiversity affirming care as well. It should be applied across the board in general education classrooms, especially now that we know that whether it could be dyslexia, it could be autism, it could be trauma related, and you just don't know what a child is going through, especially in the early ages. That's just my soapbox, I feel like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have these conversations a lot with, people that I collaborate with a lot, and we have these discussions, we go round and round about how it needs to be, and especially with April being Autism Acceptance Month. Like, yes, that's really important, but I feel like it needs to be a little bit wider.
It should
And,
be like neurodiversity affirming month. Not to take
exactly,
away
yeah.
from autism, because I don't know how like the autistic community feels about that, but maybe there should be a month at least, if it's not April, that is neurodiversity affirming.
I think there's a is it the 1st week of April or the last week of March? One of them is Neurodiversity, like, Acceptance Week. It's honestly very overlooked.
Yeah, it's got to be newer too.
Yeah.
So, how can a modified workspace be implemented in the classroom?
Yes, there's a bunch of things. The first thing is gonna be teaching about those strengths and differences, so allowing everybody, especially in the gen ed curriculum, as I'm thinking about with the school students I work with, allowing them to see that there's different people with disabilities, all around them. That could be with books, that could be with social scenarios. I know I have a whole list of just inclusive books in my classroom that the kids can come take anytime and they can read them. And I have a couple examples in a couple slides here, about what that is. And then the universal design for all. So that means accessibility for everybody. So whether that's multimodal communication, letting everybody come to the playground, having those inclusive, playgrounds, lunch areas. I know in our school, particularly, we just put up communication systems that are the big boards so that way everybody can use them to communicate, which has been fantastic. And I know I've been talking with a bunch of people that I know personally who are working on getting more of an inclusive playground in one of the local schools because they have kids with disabilities who have wheelchairs, who have trouble walking or, moving around. So that way they can all be, playing and that way nobody's left out.
Yeah, I love that.
Another great quote that I found, I didn't make it, I don't know who made it. It says, "Don't assume pity or attitude. Do it because you have to, or do it because you have to. Do it because you want to be inclusive." I think that's a really huge thing. A little bit going into that double empathy problem and the bias of, okay, this is great that you're doing it, but don't come at it at a pity party. Don't come at it as, oh, look what I did. I'm so great. It should
Mhm.
be a very more accepted, inclusive way of looking at things.
Right, and if that like, we were going back to what we were talking about before, if that was just something we did in general, that like, to just be more inclusive in general and use more neurodiversity affirming practices, then you wouldn't have, like, that, like, "I did this for the month of April," and whatnot.
Mhm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. There we go. So some of the books that I have personally seen and have been recommended that are great for working on that inclusive piece is The ABCs of Inclusion. That's by Beth. I think it's Leakoltz. I think it's still in production. I thought I saw that that was going away soon. This Kid Can Hyperfocus, which is a great one about like ADHD and stuff. The Boy with Big Big Feelings is one more about that anxiety piece, the autism piece. And then A Day with No Words is another one, which is by Tiffany Hammond. And that one just became a New York Times bestseller, which is great. There's also one by Jordan Christian Levon, which is about kids with apraxia. So yeah, there's just so many. Honestly, if you just Google, you can find them, but those are just some of the ones that I've personally seen used and have been just great.
I love that. I've seen only one of these, so thank you for sharing the other 3.
Yeah. And so kind of taking that inclusive or a modified workspace kind of out of the gen ed curriculum, more like widespread. Noise canceling headphones are great. I know a lot of my kids use those. Having dim lights, having sensory spaces, access to fidgets, and visuals. A lot of kids do better visually than they do auditorily. So kind of having all that open and with the fidgets too, having the kids know like, yes, this is a fidget. This is used to help you focus. And it's not a distraction. This is like there's a reason that we're using this.
I love those visuals. Yeah, hopefully anybody that's listening to this, if they want to see these visuals, they can go to YouTube. It's like Speechy Side Up. If you just search for it, you should be able to find the channel, and we'll try to include the link in the show notes as well. But I love the schedule that you have here and the visuals and like the other examples for how to make it more accommodating. So thank you for sharing that. So, with regards to the IEPs, since we're talking about within the school setting, how can we promote the goals to be more strengths based?
So the biggest thing is going to be writing. There's a lot of things, and this is kind of goes back to that medical model versus the social model of how things are written, how things are perceived. They're often perceived in a very negative way. So saying somebody is defiant or non-compliant or aggressive or attention seeking, and kind of seeing if you can just flip that on its head a little bit and more of that presuming competence. So instead of defiant, oh, they're dysregulated right now, they're non-compliant, oh, they might be afraid of something, or they might be anxious instead of aggressive. And there's a great resource from Not an Autism Mom. I know she's on Facebook and I also believe Instagram. And that's where this visual comes from for those that are watching. And it's a great look at like how to change your wording around and how to do it in a more positive way.
I love that. Thank you for sharing this example. This is great. Do you have any examples of goals that you write?
Yeah, and a lot of them actually came from, well, not specifically, but Rachel Dorsey is an autistic SLP. I haven't taken her course yet, but I've seen examples and it's fantastic. So, for example, I might be one of using AAC, where kids might not be able to use them throughout the day. So, for example, like giving unrestricted access to communication supports, the student will share about a highly preferred topic, using multimodal, including like signs, gestures, AAC, etc., with 80% accuracy or whatever they want to use as far as that percentage.
Hmm. This is great. Thank you for like sharing the difference between the medical model and strengths based. And yeah, I refer to Rachel as well when it comes to like these goals, just because it's great to hear her perspective. And she really does a great job of like explaining the difference.
Mhm. And a lot of times, especially with some of the older kiddos, because I have kindergarten to 5th grade. So for the 3rd grade and older, if they're speaking individuals, I ask them personally, I'm like, "What do you wanna work on?" I know I had a kid where I was working on his goals and I dropped a sound that he was working on. And he looked at me and he went, "Wait, where's this goal? Why don't I have it?" And I was like, "Well, is that what you wanna work on?" And he goes, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay, we can add it back in, sure." So, yeah, avoiding that ableist language is a big one. So, like, forcing eye contact, forcing conversational exchanges, and doing more of that positive, child-centered, strengths-based approach.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you ask them what they want to work on when they're older too. That's great.
Mhm. That leads to a lot of buy-in too, I've noticed, because if
I
they're just
bet.
coming to speech and they don't know what they're doing, then why
Yeah.
are we here? You know?
Yeah, it's like, why? How did you even pick these? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think anybody listening to this could use that across the board, even with neurotypical clients.
Mhm.
Is there anything else you want to talk about before we finish today?
Kinda going back with the IEP, the specially designed instruction, making sure everything is in there, so making sure they have the access to AAC, making sure they have the unrestricted access to sensory items, so that way it's carried out throughout the day, whatever they need, it's there.
This looks great. So, are these additional resources that you would recommend?
Yeah, yep, so Rachel Dorsey up there, we have Neurodiversity in the classroom, that's what I'm slowly working through. It's a really great example, and then the Therapist Neurodiversity Collective is another great one. There's all kinds, if you Google, there's just so many, great people that are wanting to, do this more neurodiversity and just this wonderful community that's been slowly building throughout the years.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you for sharing this in case people want to learn more. Well, Brooke, this has been amazing. If people want to connect with you and learn more, where's the best place to find you?
So I'm on Instagram. I'm at Brookie, BROOKIE _1107. It's kind of a mix of just personal life and also speech therapy things, but recently it's been more of the speech therapy side of things.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And until next time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. By the way, have you joined the SSU crew yet? By joining, you get access to the free goods section on our website, plus podcast updates, special event notifications, and therapy inspiration. You can sign up at bit.ly/join SSU crew, all lowercase, or just find the link in this episode description. Also, don't forget to take a screenshot of this episode so that you can always refer back to it and share it on social media if you really love the topic. Take care and remember to always fill your speechy side cup first before you can pour into others.